My native Austria sometimes has a reputation of being a bit slow, relaxed and laid back. But when in 1989 the Iron Curtain fell, many Austrian companies, led by the Austrian banks, were quick to pick up opportunities in Eastern Europe. They internationalized and generated fantastic incomes for themselves. More recently, we have seen that for these Austrian companies in Eastern Europe, there were also risks involved. With some of the economies slowing down, some of the banks were taking quite heavy hits. Now, if you as a corporation trying to figure out whether you should go international, well, there is a few tests that you conduct in order to figure out if it's a good decision. The first one would be an attractiveness test. How attractive is a particular market? Are there growth opportunities? Clearly, in 1989, Eastern Europe looked like a very attractive market. Not lots of services offered at the time, growth opportunities were projected, eager consumers to get Western products, so it looked like a very attractive market. Second test you conduct is a better off test. Are you as a corporation going to be able to actually offer something in these markets that is unique, that generates value more than anybody else can? So back to the Austrian banks in Eastern Europe, well, are they able to offer services which other banks might not be able to? And for them the answer was probably yes, they can offer Western products that were not yet in these Eastern European markets. They have long cultural traditional ties going back to the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, which provided them with some advantage to other Western institutions. So it looked pretty much like it's a certain yes that they will be better off by moving into these markets. And finally, the cost of entry test. How expensive will it be for you to enter a particular market? Are there particular regulatory requirements? Are there any barriers to enter that will be hard to overcome? For Austrian banks, probably again the opportunities looked really quite great. They were able to acquire local banks which were not quite up to speed and which at the time were still quite cheap. So for them, probably on all these three accounts, they could put a yes. So once you figured out that it's really a good idea to internationalize, you probably have to think a bit harder about how to go about that. One aspect is classic decision about should you export, should you make an acquisition, should you just license your products. But another one which I find more fundamental is the question how much you should actually adapt to the markets that you enter. So the first approach that you could take is a standardization process. You could decide that in fact in these new markets you will offer exactly the same type of products and services that you already have in your home market, and you will also go about the production or the service implementation in exactly the same way as you already do it. This is probably going to make sense for extremely simple products. So for example, think McDonald's, where you can produce the burgers exactly the same way in every new market and gain tremendous scale that way. It is also true for extremely complex products, say for example Boeing producing aircrafts. Well, if they start to adapt them to each of the different markets, the costs are going to be so high that it doesn't make sense to internationalize at all. Likewise, for the customers, many of them being global themselves, it would be such a complex and complicated process to learn how to deal with different aircrafts in all these different places that it wouldn't make sense either. The next category that you could opt for is adaptation. So you could decide, while in essence you will keep many of the core approaches, core processes in place, you'll make some adaptations that are necessary to meet the local requirements, the customer taste, the regulatory requirements. For example, in pharmaceutical, you would find that the distribution techniques have to be adjusted to different markets. In some markets, you would have hospitals and doctors as the main customers. In others, it is insurance companies. Again, in others, it would be the end customer who actually buys medication. There might also be different regulatory requirements, and you might be doing some additional adaptive kind of R&D in order to meet these requirements. But the essence of the product, the medication, will stay the same across the world. And the final approach could be a glocal approach, where you really see that opportunities, ideas come from all over the world, and that best practices can be picked up across the world and is not something that has to come from the center. This might be more costly than these other approaches, but also might bear some additional opportunities. And even companies that, more generally speaking, you would see strongly fitting into the standardization category, sometimes adopt elements of a glocal approach. So for example, Starbucks had the chai tea initially developed in Thailand and then tested in other markets because they thought this is an interesting product that we can really move across the entire globe. Don't think about standardization, adaptation, and glocal as pure categories and companies falling into exactly one of these categories, but they're going to be somewhere on this scale. It also might be that they fall more broadly speaking into standardization, but then some aspects would still be adapted. There might even be sometimes ideas in the Starbucks case that are picked up from local consumers, whereas most of the approaches are standardized.